Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, it's another year, another time to make some more money, and I've got the course for you. Start the conversation, get the meeting will help your team, both business development, sales development, get into those new cold accounts, whether that function is under marketing or sales. I'll help you with that by starting organic, natural conversations, not pitching. Have people open up with you, build up a connection with them, understand your total addressable market, prioritize it, and put in a system that scales, that's predictable, that works the way you want it to work instead of the old school pitch. Believe me, I've sat through so many of these cold calling seminars, courses, books, and I've been doing it for 30 years, and it's evolved. And what I'm doing today is what's working in today's world. It works naturally, and people are just loving it, getting meetings, closing deals, and doing it without the rejection that is typically there in sales. So check it out at b2brevenue.com under the training tab. You can schedule a call with me. We can talk it over. I'll explain how it works and how we can work together on it. You can buy it per student, or I'll customize it for your particular product and team and coach you through that process. Also, if you're a sales leader and you want predictability, you want direction, momentum, and control with your deals, you can sign up for that course as well. Same type of model. A year-long access to it. It's content, community, and coaching, all included at b2brevenue.com. You can get my free ebook there on how companies make product selections. That's all free. Let's get into the interview, but I want to make sure you're checking out my partners. They're in the show notes. This week, it's Pipedrive and CoVideo. Pipedrive is the new CRM. It's been out for 5 years. I've been using it forever. I love that. It's connected up with your email, your calendar, and now they have team capabilities. CoVideo is the video email system. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's the way to break into new accounts. It's so much more engaging than text. Check them out. Also, make sure you're checking me out on LinkedIn, Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. Hey, Louis, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Brian, great to be here. So I'm Louis Gadima. I'm the president of Revenue and Associates. We're a marketing consultancy, and we help companies grow faster, and especially are focused on helping channel vendors grow faster by enabling their channel partners to grow faster. I've been doing marketing since for about 30 plus years. I recently wrote Bullseye Marketing, which is available on Amazon and has gotten some very good reviews. And I'm host of the Software Channel Partner Podcast.
Cool. And how'd you get interested in marketing?
You know, it really was back in the pre-data days. When marketing was about creative. But now it's so much about technology and data, which is great, and I have no objection to that. You have to have the data, and you can be much more valuable with the data. But it really was, I had come out of a background doing theater, writing, directing, and was looking for a way to use some of those skills to actually make money, which you could not do in theater. And so got into marketing initially on the writing side. And my very first client was, this will take some people back. Other people will be saying, what's he talking about? My very first client was Coleco Toys at the height of Cabbage Patch Kids.
Wow.
And Cabbage Patch was the biggest.
I remember.
They sold more Cabbage Patch dolls in the first year than the entire doll category the year before. So this was kind of being lucky and being in the right place at the right time. Because even after working on that, even if people didn't want to talk to me, they wanted to hear about Cabbage Patch. And so that opened a lot of doors for me.
Cool. And what is Bullseye Marketing?
So Bullseye Marketing is an approach that I developed over the last few years because I started to realize that some approaches in marketing that get a lot of buzz don't work for a lot of companies.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I was seeing that organic social media, and I was starting to see this around 2013, 2014. I was starting to see that organic social media could get you attention, but it wasn't producing many leads or sales. And that inbound marketing took a huge effort. And there were just, for category leaders, they were able to do that. But for the vast majority of companies, they either weren't able to scale to the level of effort required to be successful with those, or their categories were so locked down by the industry leaders, they couldn't get onto page one even if they tried. And so bullseye market, and at the same time I realized that they weren't doing a lot of very fundamental things that could produce results much more rapidly. They didn't have good customer knowledge. They didn't have good websites. They had no calls to action or conversion opportunities on their websites. They had poor cooperation between sales and marketing. I had a client who their head of marketing told me it took 2 weeks for sales to respond to a lead that came over from marketing. And they weren't using their email lists, even though McKinsey says email marketing is 40 times more effective than social media marketing for customer acquisition. So they had all these great opportunities, what I call marketing assets, that they just weren't taking advantage of. And instead they were, they would say things like, oh, we want to do social media marketing to get leads. And there were leads, right under their nose. There were people coming to the website that they weren't engaging with. So bullseye marketing focuses on 3 phases. And the first is taking advantage of those marketing assets a company already has to really inexpensively and sometimes for free get more leads and sales. In the second phase, you focus on the customers who are in market now to buy, because, Brian, our markets are much smaller than we think they are, because unless we're selling something that people buy every day, like food, most customers just aren't planning to buy soon. And, in some cases, I think insurance agencies, people changed insurance agents on average every 13 years. But, if you've just bought a new house, you're not buying a new house tomorrow. If you've just bought a new car, you're not buying a new car. If you've just acquired a new software system for your company, if you're happy with the accountant and attorney your firm is using, you're not looking for a new one, in all sorts of categories. And so the second phase is focusing on intent and identifying customers who are in market now. And the third phase is where you do those long-term awareness and brand building programs like content and social media.
And who do you typically work with?
I have worked with companies from small startups to IBM and multi-billion-dollar manufacturing companies, but who I'm really focused on is companies, software vendors, and their channel partners. Because what you have is a situation where the vendors usually are very good at marketing and are very sophisticated about it, and their partners are not. And so the partners could be much better at growing their own business and much better at selling through more of the software from the vendors if they understood marketing and they were able to execute on marketing better. And so that's what my Software Channel Partner podcast is about as well, that marketing skill gap of channel partners and how vendors can help them overcome that.
Yeah, because I heard a lot of good things in your first description, because I see too many CMOs just doing what I call activity marketing. Taking the checklist of what everybody should do, have a website, put a bot up there, start a blog, start a podcast, do a YouTube channel. No one reads it, watches it, or listens to it, but it's there.
Right.
And I think your point is right, that inbound is a long game and only applies really to certain spaces.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's certain industries. I really, at this point, as you know, Brian, the top 3 links on page one of Google will get over 50% of all search traffic. And in fact, Ahrefs put out a study recently that over 90% of content, web pages, get 0 visits from organic search traffic. That's, less than 1 in 10 new. So if you think you're going to be blogging, unless you've already got high domain authority and are the leader in your industry, or you have a ton of money, or you're doing something that's totally new. Like I worked with a company a few years ago, and they were in a brand new technology, and they really could get high search ranking because no one else had produced content on it. That's really rare, but it worked for them.
Right.
But unless you're in one of those 3 situations, you should not be expecting content to generate a lot of new attention and leads very quickly.
Well, let's take an example, say like a $10 million a year startup. They're growing. They're not doubling, but they're growing at 10, 20% a year. There's very little inbound leads. What journey would you take them through?
It's really a matter of figuring out where their customer is and how they can get to their customer, and it's going to be different for every industry. And so, for example, I'm working with a company right now. They're not a startup, but they're about that size. They're a technology company, and they have a very particular solution, and they have a really narrowly there is a very narrow slice of customers who can use their technology, but that market is there. So general marketing doesn't work. Search marketing doesn't work because their customers are way too sophisticated. They're not searching. They get a lot of traffic to their website from Wikipedia, but that doesn't mean anything because the people who are looking up the topic on Wikipedia are, again, not their customer. They're probably students or people who are just coming into the field. And so we developed some very, very focused, once we did these kind of foundational things like improving the website, adding conversion experiences and offers, and so forth, then we created some very specific campaigns to get to those people who actually could be potential customers. And but in other cases, it may be easier. It varies so much from company to company, but you really, I'm in those early phases of ramping up a marketing program and improving that at a company. I really want to focus in on how specific can I be, not how broad can I be, and how can I really get in front of just their customers and make their marketing as efficient as possible.
And let's get into that efficiency, because I think too many marketing people look at quantity versus quality, because that's how they either get comped or that's how they, put their flag on the top of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I deal with CMOs all day, and it's all about numbers, but sometimes the wrong numbers.
Yeah, well, I know companies, for example, who have totally reversed their philosophy of gating content.
Yeah. Because
they were getting crap leads. And, people, from Mickey Mouse.
Right. Mickey Mouse.
Literally.
Right.
Right, exactly. And I know companies that have changed their philosophy at trade shows, and that they're, it has. So I looked at HubSpot, and created inbound marketing. I was at a conference 5 or 6 years ago. This was part of this kind of coming up with the bullseye approach when I was realizing some of these things. And one of the speakers, it was a conference on ABM, and one of the speakers was a CMO, and he was saying that at their tech company, they needed 400 new contacts to get one deal.
Yeah.
And then I looked at HubSpot, and I saw that the numbers were about the same. They needed 300 or 400 new contacts to get one deal. And this is one of the big complaints that I would have from clients when they would try some marketing programs. They'd say, well, we haven't been marketing before, and all of our leads were word of mouth, and they were really good leads, and now we're getting all these crap contacts that, almost none of them are going to turn into actual customers. And so, that's that inefficiency. That's what your $10 million a year company just can't afford to scale up and qualify leads that way. So I know a lot of marketers in the last few years who have become much more focused on the quality of their leads and not huge quantities of new contacts.
And that's it, because the contacts we don't need anymore because everyone's visible.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get the email address of your whole total addressable market probably within a month.
Yeah. The contacts aren't important, and the salespeople will especially be the first ones to tell you.
Express why.
That's not a lead. That's a name.
That's a name.
That's in part what that second phase of the bullseye is about, is who's actually in market now, and not just a phase 3 tire kicker or someone who's kind of interested in the industry who might be buying 3 or 4 years from now. But how can we use intent data, search marketing, and other types of programs to get in front of people who plan to buy soon?
And what do you see working with intent? There's a lot of review sites and content sites that are now selling this data. Is that what you mean by intent? There's
intent. I mean, the easiest intent kind of marketing is search advertising. Because if you focus on the right keywords with your search ads, you can, be much more likely to be getting in front of people who are buying and not just researching. I mean, it's the difference between a keyword that says of email marketing or email marketing software versus one that shows much more intent, which is email marketing software pricing.
Okay. Yeah,
Something.
I see.
So again, you really narrow it down to those long tail keywords, but they're much more focused and they're much more about intent. And then you have tools you can use that track who's coming to your website. Are you seeing surges of people, new account activity? Suddenly last month, that company wasn't coming to your website, but this month 3 or 4 people from that company are, and they're checking out your product pages, they're downloading your white papers, they're signing up for your webinars, they're reading your emails. You've got companies like Bombora and the Big Willow and others that have B2B intent data in specific markets. On the consumer side, you've got companies like Amazon and Kroger that have amassed a lot of intent data. So again, it depends on what industry you're in, but there's lots of different ways that you could start to look at that.
Now, once you exhaust that, then you go to somebody who has the audience of your ideal customer profile, or?
Yeah. So you've got, in the tech side, you've got the tech targets and IDG Connects and IDG and other companies who have that audience. And in other markets, there's other content vendors who have aggregated or accumulated hundreds of thousands or millions of people who have registered for content, and they have a lot of profile information. I mean, if you look at Tech Target, that's what they're all about.
Yeah.
They I think they have something like 180 websites now on all sorts of different tech subjects, and a huge number of people who are registered, and so they can see that kind of surge data in the same way that Bombora can across many thousands of websites.
And how much of this is art versus science?
It's always a combination of both.
Yeah.
Because, the art, I think, is in the understanding of the customer. It still all starts, all the new technologies and all the new data hasn't made anyone obsolete. All they've added more people.
Yeah.
Marketing automation.
Yeah.
Marketing automation has not put anyone out of work.
No, it's put a lot of people in work. And I always get
Exactly.
that. It's like my manager 30 years ago said, oh, they're not going to need salespeople in 5 years. And there's probably 100 or 1,000 times as many salespeople today as there was then.
It's interesting. You do hear sometimes analysts talking about, we may need fewer salespeople, or that salespeople are getting laid off. But definitely in marketing, you still need to be really close to your customer. You need to start by talking to them and understanding what they're about and what their needs are and how they view you and your competition and what's really important to you, as opposed to what incorrectly you thought was important to them. And you need your creatives, you need your project managers and all those sorts of people. But now, layered on top of that, you've got all the data and technology too. So you really need both.
And why did you choose more the consulting route versus the agency route?
Well, I had an agency for a dozen years that I sold about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was successful. And we were one of the leaders in our market niche. And today it's I still provide agency type services to clients when they need them. We can develop websites, and we can do writing, and we can do other types of design and run campaigns and so forth. But I don't need a staff to do that.
Yeah.
In today's market, it's just, and the funny thing is, I started out in video, and this was the way the film and video industry had been organized for decades. You had a crew come together for a particular shoot, whether it was 1 day or 2 days or a feature film, and then they all split and went in different directions, and they might come together, some of them on the next project or not. And I remember 20, 30 years ago, people calling it the Hollywood model. But now it's just the way that we do business.
The gig economy, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen the creation of more niche agencies, ones that are focused on, intent data, focused on a particular audience or persona. Because every time a startup starts, they do the same thing. They hire a VP of marketing or a CMO. They start a staff of content creation, event attendance, and it seems very redundant.
Yeah, I think there are some niche agencies, especially around biotech and healthcare and science topics.
Yeah.
I know that when I had my agency, we specifically stayed out of those fields. We didn't pursue business in those areas because we knew they had specialized needs and we couldn't help them, and there were agencies that could. And I think that there are other agencies who really do focus on tech, or they really focus on consumer. They may not be narrow in the way that I'm talking about helping software channel programs and vendors and their partners. It's funny, I just, for my podcast, interviewed Jay McBain, who's the Forrester analyst on channels.
Yeah.
And he talks about how companies have to become super narrow in their approaches. That you can't have just a vertical approach. You have to be in what he calls sub-industries, so that you can say, especially for the partners, that the partners need to specialize. And it may be a geographic specialization. It may be a sub-industry specialization. I always think, I've long thought that having a niche specialization is a huge advantage for most companies.
Yeah, because you become really good at it. It takes other people too long to ramp. The patience for the investment community is really short. So everybody wants results very fast.
Yeah, and customers rather, it's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
They always want to know, who in our industry have you worked for? Do you really know our industry? Occasionally that creates, you're working for our competitor problem. But in general, it shows that they're not going to have to spend a lot of time educating you about the industry, and you can really hit the ground running.
And what do you see happening to marketing and B2B in the next 3 years? Yeah, I threw you a softball.
Yeah, really. It's hard to predict the future. It hasn't happened yet. Again, Jay McBain started our conversation off by saying he thought the channel had changed more in the last 18 months than the previous 35 years.
Yeah.
And I actually don't see new things are always coming into play, like AI or VR. There's always new channels. There's always new technologies. But Brian, I did a study 5 years ago of 351 B2B companies with 50 to 1,000 employees, and how much were they using marketing technology. And so with 50 to 1,000 employees, these are not solopreneurs. They're not tiny companies. In fact, there's 3 times as many people working for companies of that size than for enterprises. Yeah. So it's the real heart of the economy. And what I found was that software companies marketed very aggressively and were using scored 7 of 9 on my digital marketing scorecard. And non-software companies, including these channel partners who are service providers and other manufacturers and medical device companies, in 2014, they only scored 2 out of 9 on the digital marketing scorecard. I went back last year and looked at the same 351 companies. Those non-software companies had only moved from 2 to 3 out of 9. And that was mostly because they had redesigned their websites and made them mobile friendly. So for the vast majority of companies, and this is where bullseye marketing comes from, for the vast majority of companies, the next new thing is not important because they haven't taken care of the foundation. And it's the marketing 1%, as I call them, that can use AI and can use the most advanced new technologies and data. But for the vast majority of companies, there's huge leaps to be gained, huge advantages to be gained just by getting the basics right.
Yeah, I think that's a great niche. And, I'm kind of seeing the need for almost like a persona-based either agency or companies, people who sell to VPs of engineering. And they want that curated audience pre-built so that they don't have to build it from scratch.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I think in some areas you do have companies who do provide that.
Yeah, I think when you describe like biotech and ones that are super hard to get to, where they're not socially active or are in market for things they don't even know they need.
Right. And for example, there's one agency that is especially aligned with Kroger and the use of their intent data. And there are agencies that just focus on Amazon marketing.
Yeah.
Or some of these marketplaces on how can you optimize your results, either through design and pages and ads and so forth. So there definitely is some specialization out there.
Cool. Hey, so where do people go to connect with you and learn more about your work?
So, thank you for having me on, Brian. They can go to revenueassociates.biz, and there is a link there to the podcast. The Software Channel Partner podcast is available on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever fine podcasts are sold. You can find my Bullseye Marketing book on Amazon. You can email me, Lois, Louis, at revenueassociates.biz, or I'm Louis Gadima on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm available.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, I want to make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. That is where you can get a free copy of an ebook that I did. It's a real ebook. It's not a fluff book. It shows and talks about how companies make buying decisions and how you can influence that from both a marketing and a sales standpoint, how to find all the people that are in the decision path and what they need to see, know, and touch and feel before they make a product selection. If your team needs some coaching, some help, some training, some systems, some processes that do work today, because we know what doesn't work, or you know what doesn't work, I'll show you what does work and how to connect and get into pretty much any account. It includes deal coaching and content community, and I can customize it for your particular company. Just go to b2brevenue.com, look under training, schedule a call with me. We can talk it over, or just sign up. You can pay per month or all at once, whichever makes most sense for your budget. Also, I put out videos pretty much daily on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, it's Brian G. Burns, and on YouTube, it's Brian Burns Sales. Just search for that if you like to consume some video content. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please put a comment and a share and a like on some of the videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a company page for each podcast. This one, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, where I put both content and humor videos out daily. And tell a friend about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Check out the show notes for all the partners and the connections you can make there, the coupon codes for the products to evaluate them, see if they're a right match for you. And we'll see you next time.